Welcome to Bone2Pick, Hip-BoneMusic's Artist of the Month interview series. I am super psyched to be interviewing one of my all-time favorite musicians today, the great Randy Brecker. Randy, his impact on the New York scene, on the jazz world, is immeasurable. He's a virtuosic instrumentalist, internationally renowned composer, a 5-time Grammy Award winner. He's done it all, and he's played with everybody you can possibly imagine. We're just thrilled to be speaking with Randy today. Randy, thanks so much for taking time out of your busy schedule.
Well, thanks for having me. I enjoy your website.
All right, thank you, Randy. Let's jump right in. Maybe talk a little bit about your childhood. And I know you grew up in the Philadelphia area and went to Cheltenham High School, which, for those of you who don't know, has the most unbelievable alumni list I've ever seen. You've got Randy and Michael Brecker, Benjamin Netanyahu, Reggie Jackson, Dave Fink, Jeff Lorber, Andy Snitzer. It's quite an all-star group. But more than that, I know your dad had a big influence on you in terms of becoming a musician, and also, in addition to that, just the relationship you and your brother Michael must have had as young guys growing up. Could you just share some of the memories you have?
Well, Dad was a semi-professional but really great pianist and singer and songwriter who honed his craft at a music camp, wrote all the camp songs, all the songs for the show. Mike and I went to this camp, and it was still going strong when we went there. In fact, the musical director, when we were there at the girls' camp, was none other than Marvin Hamlish, to show you the level of the music program at these camps. But they still, 30 years later, Dad's songs were still part of the repertoire of these camps. They were great songs. So he was just a big influence. He loved jazz. Kind of played like Dave Brubeck, I suppose, in that vein. But he also loved trumpet players, mainly because, he loved Miles and Dizzy. But growing up in Philadelphia in that time period was the period where Clifford Brown was playing in Philadelphia on a regular basis. So he was the talk of the town, and Dad would talk about him all the time, had all the records. When I was about, he was killed when I was 10 years old, 10 going on 11. So that was probably the biggest influence, was listening to and hearing about Clifford all the time. And he had jam sessions. There was another good trumpet player named Bobby Mojica who would come over, who was still playing in Detroit. So we just grew up with the sounds from earliest recollections. He would get home from work, put on a bunch of records through dinner, we'd listen to music, and eventually, when we started playing, which I'll get to, we formed kind of a family band. So music was always around the house. When I was in 3rd grade, this was a small school, almost no music program. They had trumpets or clarinets available for the orchestra. And so I grabbed the trumpet. I had my sights. Trombone looked like it was more fun to play, and I liked that instrument too, but they didn't have any. As simple as that. So I had heard so much great trumpet playing around the house that I grabbed the trumpet and started to study soon thereafter with Sigmund Herring from the Philadelphia Orchestra. Probably was about 9 years old when I started to study with him. Conversely, 3 years later, they still only had trumpets or clarinets, so Mike got kind of stuck with the clarinet, as he put it, which he never took to, but he also had a very good teacher. His name was Leon Lester from the Philadelphia Orchestra. After he started playing and I was playing for a couple years, we used to get together in the bathroom because we liked the echo, and we would just play free. We didn't know too much about chord changes at that age or standards. We would just play. We liked the sound, and we kind of re-represented that on my first record, Score, where Mike and I played a duet. Like the basis of the tune was "Pop Goes the Weasel," which was probably something we played at that age. We played nursery rhymes, and we just went for it at that early age. And I recently listened to that record, Score. It was quite inventive, the duet. It was really, we were good at it.
Yeah.
And eventually my sister, who was in between, was classical pianist, and she doubled on bass. And we had a set of drums. Both Mike and I, particularly Mike, kept up his drum chops. He was a great drummer. So we kind of had a family band. I played a little vibes. So music was always just at the forefront of everything we did in our family.
That's great. Well, you kind of figure that just, you know, the relationship you and Mike had musically, obviously as brothers too, but it seems like that would be fostered at such an early age.
Yeah,
That's great.
it was amazing. And also Philadelphia had a lot to do with our interest too, because it was such a hotbed of musical activity in every genre in that town at that time. You know, of course, we were studying with players of Philadelphia Orchestra, so we used to go hear them all the time, and that was incredible. But there were, on the other side of the spectrum was American Bandstand, which was emanating from South Philly, and we were sometimes allowed to watch it. Dick Clark was really a jazz fan who would find talent in mostly in South Philly. A lot of the guys were closet jazz musicians. You probably know the names, like Frankie Avalon was a trumpet player named Frankie Avalona who went to school with Lou Tobacco, and he became a movie star through American Bandstand. There was another guy, I forget his the time, but he was known as Bobby Rydell. He was also a pop singer. He was a good jazz drummer, played with Pat Martino when he was young.
Interesting.
They had a band together. So there was that element, and the show became really popular. So Dick Clark also had a lot of R&B black bands on the show. So that was at least my first recollection of hearing soul music or R&B was on that show. And then I discovered an R&B channel right next to the jazz channel on the AM radio station. Of course, what was happening in Philly that time, jazz-wise, is already legendary. The Heath brothers were still in town. Coltrane's presence was felt. Benny Golson, Lee Morgan, who was just coming up, who was taught by my second trumpet teacher, Tony Marcion, who's Nick's father. So all these guys were around Philly, so it was an amazing place to be around at that time.
Yeah, sounds like an incredibly fruitful time for that city. Following high school, you went to Indiana University and studied with Bill Adam, and I guess Jerry Coker was around in those days?
It was Jerry Coker. First was Buddy Baker. Then for the first year was Buddy, and he was great too. Roger Pemberton, and then Jerry Coker came and started to build up the jazz program. IU was a great music school in the classical tradition, had a great also fledgling jazz department. There were 3 big bands, but other than the actual playing or the performance, there was no theory program, there was no degree program set. So Coker's was instrumental in at least starting some classes. But to gain more theoretical knowledge, I drove to Indianapolis once a week and studied with Dave Baker, who was teaching privately. And he, at that time, also formed a band and had me in the band. He had just started playing cello. David Lam, the pianist, was the pianist in the band. He was living in Indianapolis. And there were also great players in Indianapolis. I was lucky to be there at that time. People that played with George Russell and Slide Hampton was kind of in and out of town. Of course, Freddie was from Indianapolis, so that and the Montgomery Brothers. So that was heavily J.J. Johnson. So that their presence was heavily felt around town, and I played quite a bit in Indianapolis during that 3-year period. Also, this is kind of a strange thing that I'd almost halfway forgotten about, but Booker T of Booker T and the MGs was going to Indiana at that time, my first year, to get a degree in music composition.
Oh, wow.
So he played trombone in the band, and he liked the way I soloed. So every weekend for about 1.5 years, he had a local Booker T and the MG band. They did all. I had never heard of him previously, but I kind of upped my Stax repertoire by playing with him on weekends for a couple of years when he was there.
Wow, very cool, very cool. So following Indiana, you went to Europe with the band and then stayed in Europe for a bit, or
yeah, I did. Let's know your history there. Well, what happened was in 1965 we won the Notre Dame Jazz Festival. We had a particularly really good big band that year, so I must say we deservedly won because we were killing. And one of the I forget if it was a prize, but it was the upshoot of our winning that festival. We were given the opportunity to go on a State Department tour in January or February of 1966. And so instead of going back to class, the band was sent on an extended, it was about 3.5, 4 months long State Department tour through the Middle East and Asia, which was fascinating. We got to play quite a bit, but we saw all the Arab countries. We toured throughout India, Sri Lanka, which was Ceylon, Pakistan, Syria, Iran, Iraq. It was amazing. Coker, midway through the tour, I think missed his wife too much, so he went back to Indiana. And Whit Seidner, who was a couple years older than the rest of us, wonderful baritone saxophonist and arranger and writer in his own right, who is now, and for many years, ended up being the head of the music school at University of Florida, now is the chair. They took over the band, and we just continued to tour. It was amazing. Wow. And after which, this is another interesting story, I stayed in Europe. We saw an advertisement in Downbeat that summer in Vienna, by now it was a 4-month tour, so it was edging in on June, and we were pretty whipped by then, let me tell you. But I think the last city was Beirut. We spent a couple weeks in Beirut, which was beautiful then. There was a contest advertised in Vienna, the first international jazz competition, and the judges was set up by a Viennese pianist named Friedrich Gulda, and he had hired as judges Cannonball Adderley, Joe Zawinul, Mel Lewis, Ron Carter, Art Farmer, and JJ. So this was an opportunity too great to pass up.
Yeah.
So several of us made our way to Vienna and checked into a youth hostel for about 2 weeks, where they had finals, semifinals, and we all got to know each other. And that was a fascinating 2-week period, because also at this festival we were all young kids, 17 to maybe I was like 20, I think, at the time. But people like Miroslav Vitus was there, George Mraz, who I'm playing with tonight, 47 years later or whatever it is. Jan Hammer, Franco Ambrosetti, Eddie Daniels had come from the U.S. He was actually playing with Thad Jones' Mel Lewis band, so the deck was stacked for him. Jiggs Wiggum, Claudio Roditi, Tomasz Stanko. I'm probably forgetting some people that, and we became really close. Joachim Kuhn. We became, because we were together for 2 weeks, very close. And so when one by one we made our way eventually to New York, we kind of helped each other, I think. So that was, and they never had that festival again. I won second prize by Franco Ambrosetti, who I just played with last month. We hadn't seen each other in 15 years, and he had found out that he edged me out by 1/10 of a point. He won first prize, but we stayed friends all these years. It's amazing.
That's an incredible lineup of talent there.
And so in the second band, we both performed, and our band was myself, George Mraz, Jan Hammer, among others.
Wow.
So
that's a great story. So following that, in 1966, you moved to New York, and can you share some of the thoughts and memories of those first few years living in New York?
Well, instead of going back to IU, since I had met all these people, Mel had been very nice. We got to know him too. In fact, he had just recorded the first Thad and Mel record, and somehow he took me under his wing. I forget the circumstance, but I ended up going back to his hotel room because he wanted to play his new record for Cannonball. So imagine, I'm like 19 or 20, how thrilled I must have been. He had a little record player, and it was just Mel Lewis, Cannonball, and me. you know, in the room, and he's playing Cannonball, the first Thad Jones record, and he's pointing out where somebody screwed up, and Pepper's playing a solo. He's watching. He gets hung up on the changes here, and they were laughing. You know, it's like two kids. So to me, I thought that was amazing. So he kind of, you know, he said, you should come to New York. So instead of going back to IU, I only had one semester to go. I went to NYU to try to finish the degree. I studied with Ray Cressara there, who was a fantastic player. I got to do a lot of sessions with later. But then I slowly got just sucked into the music scene. Clark Terry, who had been a judge at the Notre Dame Festival, kindly called and asked me to join his big band, and thing escalated pretty quickly in the New York scene. It was a really exciting time to be here. It was kind of the tail end of the traditional jazz studio scene, where all those guys were doing all the dates, you know, show up in the date with a suit and tie.
Right.
Marvin Stamm came to town around the same time, so Clark asked him to join his big band too. So we started helping each other, and we got into the scene relatively quickly. You know, you show up on a session, it's Richard Davis or Ron Carter or Mel Lewis and Snooky Young and Ernie Royal and all these amazing Thad doing sessions. Herbie Hancock might be playing piano and Oliver Nelson doing the charts. So it was amazing.
Yeah, it sounds like an unbelievable time. That's incredible. You know, this story I've heard for years, and I've always wanted to ask you about it. But your amazing musical dedication and integrity seemed to be at the forefront early in your professional career when you were on Blood, Sweat, and Tears, and then Blood, Sweat, and Tears, I guess, was kind of perched to become the pop icon that it became. But it wasn't what you were looking for, and you left and joined Horace Silver's band. And I always found that to be just an incredible, inspiring story. But anyway, if you could share.
Well, there was a little stupidity involved too. I don't know, because it's nice that you put it in that framework, and I did really want to play, so that was the forefront, which is why I left. It was a great opportunity. Horace had been auditioning guys, and he auditioned me maybe 6 months earlier, and then he hired Charles Tolliver, who was trying to float between Horace's band and Max Roach. So one day Horace called me up and said, you got the gig, and it was a great band with Billy Cobham and Benny Maupin and John B. Williams. But at the same time, to tell you the truth, Blood, Sweat, and Tears was trying to up their commercial ante by hiring another lead singer, whose name was David Clayton Thomas. And previously I had been a sideman, but they did offer me, they were going to cut everything equally and share in all the profits, and all the horn players were going to be, so they really tried to talk me into staying. But Al Cooper didn't want to be in a position of not being the lead singer, so we had a meeting one night, and Al quit the band because he didn't want to be in that position. And I chose that time to tell everybody that Horace had called, and I said, you guys will never make it without Al. Was my last words, and we kind of stormed out of the meeting. And the next day, I was kind of in a bind because they had a bunch of gigs, and I had a rehearsal with Joe Henderson Big Band. My good friend Lou Soloff was sitting next to me, and I was making $100 a week with Blood, Sweat, and Tears, and Horace was paying $250. So so it was great. A big raise.
Yeah,
but Lou didn't really want to do the gig because there wasn't a lot of. Blood, Sweat, and Tears was a great band, but you didn't get a chance to play much. It was mostly, there were great arrangements by Freddie Lipsius. So I had to kind of talk him into doing it. I said, just help me out, try it for a couple weeks. So he kind of relented, and he joined the band. They went in the studio and recorded the second record, which in turn sold 11 million. Whoa. And I had my gig with Horace, and I was making $250 a week, and unbeknownst to me, he said he would work 3 weeks a month, and we worked maybe 2 weeks a month, and he took taxes out, so that left $147.50, and out of that I had to pay my hotel. So, but it was a great experience, and it led to everything is for reasons, and he was still such a big influence on on just getting me thinking about having a band and writing all the tunes and translating your everyday experiences into music as he did. And he was also one of the first really true, for lack of a better word, fusion artists, where he would fuse gospel, jazz, and his version of R&B, or just whatever experience he had. World traveling crept into his music.